There are some Black movies that everyone should see, regardless of race. These movies not only tell a story about the culture, but they also evoke feelings about the history of African Americans in this country. Listen today to see how this historic film taught America about what Black Americans went through from slavery through Reconstruction on this episode of TV Talk with the Sisters.
TV talk with the sisters. Oh, TV talk. TV talk with the sisters. TV talk with the sisters. What they have to say. What they have to say. TV talk with the sisters.
Welcome to TV Talk with the Sisters. I'm Karen.
And I'm Regina.
And we are here to talk TV. Today, we are going to talk about a movie we saw on television when we were little kids. Okay, and let me just preface this with, back when we were kids, there were so few African Americans on television. So, if somebody who looked like us was on television, you watched it. It didn't matter what the story was about. It didn't matter what was going on. It was just the experience of seeing someone who looked like us on television or in the movies. It was like, wow.
Yeah.
And so today we're talking about the autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman.
Yeah, this movie came out in 1974, so I wasn't even 10 years old. I had to be 7, I think, when this movie came out. And like you said, whenever Black people were on the screen, it was such a momentous occasion. I mean, our parents would be like, look, there's somebody, they would call us from the other room if somebody Black was on TV or a movie was on TV. They would want us to watch it. And I remember watching Miss Jane Pittman.
Yeah. And the thing is, at the time, I didn't get it. I'd be like, oh gosh, they're calling us to watch somebody Black on television. But I didn't understand how the impact that was to be like, wow, that's somebody who looks like me on television. And I guess the thing you need to realize about the some of these earlier movies that we were in is that we were just talent, okay? I mean, you would see us on the screen doing things that might have been important things, but we didn't have decision making power about that. We did not control the storyline. We was just in the movie, and you know what? We was just happy to be in the movie. I was happy to see people who looked like me there, because that meant, wow, I could do that. But one of the things I do remember when Miss Jane Pittman came on. I remember this movie from a kid, and I do have feelings about that. I mean, there's something that's pretty endearing about being able to remember to see this from the first time I ever saw this Black woman on television.
What feelings do you have about it? Like, how did it impact you?
I think it was really powerful. It was powerful to see Cicely Tyson there, being this brown-skinned woman on television, just, telling her story, talking, and being the center of attention. It was a Black woman who was the center of attention, because up until that point, usually most of the TV shows we watched, it was usually a white man who was the point of attention on the TV shows. So to have this Black woman be the center of the story, it was just kind of like, wow. Now this story... Well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go on.
No, I was going to say this story, the original story, the autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman, is by writer Ernest Gaines, who is an African American author, and he created this character. For a long time, I was thinking Miss Jane Pittman was a person. Then I was like, I need to find out who this lady is. Mm-hmm. But he created this story from interviews with people who were former slaves. And I was just like, wow, if you just think about it. Because, there's sometimes I watch this story and just kind of go, man, this woman had a rough life. But then I go back and I think, okay, if this is a compilation of a bunch of people, then that life was really a lot more different than what I really think it was. But I'm sorry, what were you gonna say, Gina?
No, I was just gonna say it was interesting to have her as the center of the story because a lot of times black people aren't the center of the story. They're supporting characters, but this was about Miss Jane Pittman in her walk from being a slave as a child to freedom to Jim Crow and all the different things that she lived through and how she maintained, and it takes her from slavery as a child into the civil rights arena. And I just thought that was so interesting, especially since it came out in the 70s and it was only in the mid 60s that we gained civil rights to be able to do things. So that was a really important movie, even though I didn't realize it at the time.
And also the fresh telling of the slavery experience. The fact that he was actually interviewing people who had actually gone through that process.
Mm-hmm.
People who remembered what slavery was like. And I mean just a whole portion of watching her as a young girl, living there on this plantation, not, having like a mama or a daddy, but she was just this child in the midst of folks.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it just really spoke to me about, okay, these people knew what slavery was about. And especially when we're at this point in our lives in this country where people are trying to erase that.
Yes.
They're trying to
Yes.
erase that history. They're trying to say, oh, it wasn't that bad, or you know what? We have the narratives and the
Yeah.
stories like Jane Pittman to say, you know what? This is what it was like. And let me just tell
Yeah.
you, this whole Jane, they took all of the bad things and they lined it up, tick, 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 in the story. And
Yeah.
I was just like, oh my goodness. And so just
Mm-hmm.
go into this. No, if you watch it, this is a sad movie. This is sad and it is trying and it's hard. I mean, if you got some trauma, this is gonna bring it all up. This story right here.
It does remind us of the hard times black people had in this country, especially during slavery, because there is this um, push to kind of sugarcoat slavery or cover it up or let's not talk about it. But when you see this movie, you see her, she's a mere child herself, but because of the color of her skin, she's subjected to this position of serving white people as if she was a grown woman. I mean, the expectations on her as a child were harsh. She was taking care of the white children and doing the field work and doing all this stuff. And as a child, there wasn't a mother or father, anybody there to protect her or cover her. And that's what a lot of children faced in slavery because of the color of their skin. And then you take it forward and you see the harshness that she had to live through and the hard living that she had. And it's just a picture of what this country used to look like. What black people had to endure, and it makes me kind of understand my parents and grandparents a little bit more. They didn't have a America that had a Barack Obama or a Kamala Harris.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't the America that they got. Their America was very harsh and very, very mean to them, and they just had to carve their way out and try to find a way to live and hope for their generations to have a better America. So that's what Miss Jane Pittman reminds me of what my grandmother and my parents lived through.
Yeah, and it also made me think about, because we talk about the violent state and all the things that we kind of go through, and I'm not discounting that, but I was just thinking of that the violence in this movie,
Yeah.
like with the patty rollers and how they all had to like run and hide. You couldn't walk on main roads because people would just come along and kill you because you're black.
Yeah.
And so just the violence that this movie just brought up all the time, and it was always there when she was a child. The violence was always there. Remember when they decided
Yeah.
they was free and they was leaving, and then
Yep.
they'd had to hide from the patty rollers who were going to kill them just because they decided to leave the plantation.
Yep.
And then here she is, a small child, trying to figure out where to go or how to get somewhere, and then just ends up going back to the plantation because you know what? I don't know what else to do. And
Yep.
so it's just this cycle of violence that stayed in her life. And then they show as she was an adult and the Klan would come through and just burn and lynch and kill people. And so this violence has always been a part of our lives, even though
It
folks, I think in probably the last couple of decades, we've pushed back on it.
yes.
And so it
Yeah.
hasn't been as constant
Yes.
or something that we see. But I think that this movie reminds us that, baby, this violence has been here a long
Yeah.
time. It's just been other people doing the violence to us.
Yeah. It changes from decade to decade, but there's still this feeling of people of brown skin not feeling totally safe
Right?
or secure wherever they may be, because a lot of the violence, we know about the violence during slavery, but the violence, this kind of highlights also the violence during the Reconstruction period, the after slavery, when they were free. They still had violence that they faced. They still was this lack of safety, walking roads, being certain places after dark, or going to certain areas of town. That was all still very much a part of their lives. And even today, there's certain areas black people don't go to,
Nope.
and we teach our children, if you're here, if you're there, this is what you do, this is what you don't do. And it's still there, but Miss Jane Pittman just reminds us that this is how this started, and
Yes.
it's still a part of America, unfortunately.
And the interesting thing about this whole story is because remember I told you there's stories where we tell the story and they were telling Ernest Gaines' story. But the people who produced this movie were not African Americans. People who directed the movie were not African Americans. As a matter of fact, I giggled because as I was reading up on it, in the movie, Mrs. Pittman is she becomes a person who's over 100 years old, and they're coming to celebrate her. And as part of this reporter from the New York Times comes to interview her in this movie to ask her about her life, which is how she tells all of these things. And the reporter is white. And I laugh because they say in the book when Ernest Gaines wrote it, he didn't give the reporter a color. He never said it's a this color or that color. As a matter of fact, at a certain portion of the book, the reporter almost disappears as this woman is telling her story. But you continue to get this white man in this story who is, taking the place of us, the viewer, going in and telling the story. And it just makes me giggle to think, okay, so we needed a white man to come in and tell us that her story
Yeah.
was significant and we should listen to it because they were going to put it on the New York Times.
Of course, that's how they draw all the audiences in. Think about this in 74. What were the chances of non-black people going to a movie or watching something on television where everybody was black, and the only white people in the movie were the slaveholders or the Klan? They
Yes.
had to have somebody in there to draw other white people in to watch it. And so they make this reporter a white man who comes for her to tell her story to. So they had to have somebody in there to draw other people in, because they're not going to want to sit through a movie where the only image of them on that screen is, okay, I'm either owning black people or I'm burning black people down. No, I don't think I'm going to go watch that movie.
Right. And the other thing that's really cool about this movie is this is 74, and they say Cicely was about 50 years old when she did this role. And I was
Wow.
thinking, with all of the makeup, because, back then we thought, oh, wow, that's what a 90-year-old black person would look like.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, I mean, if you saw Cicely when she was 90, she ain't like nothing like Miss Jane, okay?
no, nothing,
Nothing.
nothing.
I mean, she was beautiful. And I
She
just
was.
thought that was really interesting that their image of beauty of what a 90-year-old black woman would look like was way different than what actual 90-year-old black women look like. And I was thinking, did they not have any black women in the 90s to have as a sort of like a guide, or this is just they decided this is what she's going to look like? Because they put some bags and skin and stuff on her, and it was just like, woo. But I mean, I guess they had to make, Sicily look old. But
They
I
probably
was,
didn't have any black makeup artists that could
no,
age her well. Let's
no,
just say that.
they did not. They did not. But they did. I mean, but that movie is just. I mean, that movie sticks with me, and it's so funny. It's only 110 minutes, but
Yeah.
for me, it just takes so long to get through this movie. It's
Yeah.
just there's just so much going on, and it's just like wow, and
It
just the
is. It's a
images
lot.
it portrays.
Yeah. Yeah. That I get to. I understand the movie more now with my 50 something year old brain than I did
Yes,
in 70s when I watched it. I love the beginning was a little hard to watch because she was a child being kind of mistreated. But when you get to the end, when she's 100 and she's going to drink out of that white water fountain, you kind of
yes,
cheer for her
yes,
because it's like her finally being able to just be like, you know what? Screw y'all. You're,
yeah,
you're not gonna hold me back anymore. I'm 100 freaking years old. I'm gonna drink whatever water fountain I want to drink out of. Okay,
yes,
I done been
yes.
through enough. I'm tired now. And I thought, okay, all right, Miss Jane Pittman, that's right, girl. So I just thought that was a great way to end that movie, to put her in that movie in that way.
Yes, and I mean, I love it. And there's this theme that I am discovering, especially as we watch some of these older movies. The music, there is
Yeah.
this very folksy blues sound that goes with it, and it almost takes me back to like that plantation sound. The
Mm,
sound of the
yeah.
voices of the folks in the field. And I think
Yes.
they had a folks in the field song in this one. I can't remember,
Mm-hmm.
where they were all out there singing in the field, and it just kind of gives you this community feel
Mm-hmm.
about this community of people, even though they're not all like related, or they might be cousins, or they might be such and such. Even like with Miss Jane, she had all of these people taking care of her who might not have been relatives.
Yeah.
Yeah, because her relatives were killed throughout her life, and so it was just kind of like all these other people would come along, and they would all take up the thing. And I think that's the other beautiful thing that this movie shows is about the community. And I don't think they understood that's what they were doing back then. I think they were just
Yeah.
telling the story they were given. But you saw this community that wraps around itself and says, you know what, we're going to protect each other with whatever it is we got.
Yeah, that's the part I did love, was that she didn't have parents, but when the slaves were set free, the older people that were leaving took her along with them, and then
Mm-hmm.
when something happened along the way and she was kind of alone, she took a kid with her. Like, you come on along and I'm going to protect you. So there's that community in that we're in this together spirit that we still see now. I mean, we still
Yes.
see, like, we all in this together. You make an eye connection with another black person across the room. Like, I see you. Do you see me? It's one of
Yes.
those feelings or those unspoken words that we make. It's always like, okay, let's just, and I know. And so that I saw that in the movie too, and I did like that part.
And so I'm totally all in on this Jane Pittman movie. The beautiful thing is it tells our history. And that is what I love. I love
Yeah.
when sometimes I watch these older films and I see that moment in there. This moment when the man who grew up to be her son, he
Yeah.
starts telling about, you know what? We were once in Africa, and some of those Africans, they sold us off. And I mean, he just starts telling the history, and you're like, he's telling the history. He's telling our history. Look, he is telling our history in this
Yeah.
movie. And then you go,
Yeah.
this was like decades ago. We knew this. We were sharing it with each other. Come on,
Mhm.
y'all. Come on. And so I love that. I am so all in on this movie.
I do too. I mean, I'm into. I think it is, even though, like I said, the movie came from the 70s. I still think it is a movie that can be relevant today, and that young and old people, if you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend it. Don't look at it with your 2024 eyes. I want you to sit with it and think about what was going on in the country at the time this movie came out and the point they were trying to make. And so that's what I
Yep.
love about the movie.
Yep. And I always look at it from the point of view of who's actually telling the story, and know
Yes.
that we didn't have any control, but we was in there telling the story with with all we had left. Well,
Yeah.
what we did have, we were exercising that.
Yes, we did.
And so I want to thank you for listening to TV Talk with the Sisters. Welcome to season 7. I hope you're enjoying it, because this is where we're going this season, y'all. We're gonna talk about some good movies.
Thank y'all for listening, and check us out on social media, places where you listen to podcasts, and let us know what you think.
All right. Bye, y'all.
Bye.
TV Talk is produced by Karen J. Anderson, music by Karen's friend Dave, and Regina Anderson just shows up to talk.